Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated NBA senior writer, joining us on the program. Mannix, how are you today?
A little stomach churning, Dan. Mayo is disgusting.
It is.
Like, I wouldn't, like, I mean, I'm a big tuna fish eater, but I'll eat it dry at all times before I put mayo in that mix. Same thing with lobster rolls. I mean, hell no with mayo.
No, it's Hellman's.
Well, Either way, gross.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Chris. That's all we wanted to talk to you about. I thought Draymond Green accomplished what Draymond Green wanted to do, and that is he loves to troll people. And, him and Tony Allen going back and forth as to who's the greatest defender. Those guys aren't even in the conversation. But Draymond is a really good player. I don't know where you would put him as great defender of all time. But I just spent 10 minutes talking about it, so I might as well let you address it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. He accomplished exactly what he set out to accomplish, which was to set social media ablaze with the conversation. Tony Allen gets roped into it, but I think the only way you can have this discussion is to talk about generations, right? I mean, maybe Draymond Green is the best defender of this generation. He is certainly the most versatile defender.
Better than Kawhi Leonard?
I mean, I liked how Draymond could guard basically 2 to 5 for a period of time. There was like a 3-year stretch he could do that. So it's right there. But then you go back and you talk about Mutombo and Gary Payton, and you go back even further, and it's the Bill Russell discussion, which I think is where it stops. So I look, Draymond is one of, certainly, but it's hard to point him at the top.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Russell, Hakeem Olajuwon, Tim Duncan, great defender, Pippen, Jordan. There's so many great players. But as Seton pointed out, you could hand check back then. Draymond is playing in an era where you can't really use your hands on anybody. But I would probably look at Kawhi's.
I remember back in the day when I was working for the Celtics in the 90s, and I ran into Russell, one day, the rare appearance he had in Boston. This subject kind of came up where, was he being discounted as a great defender because of the era he played in? And Russell always said, Shaq was the guy he'd have a problem with because of Shaq's just raw size. He's like, anybody else I could handle. I could defend anybody else in this league from whatever generation you're talking about. That's how confident Russell was in his own defensive abilities.
All right, let's dive into it. I know you're trying to make a case because I guess there's 58 guys who are up for the MVP in the NBA. So the floor is yours. Your latest MVP candidate is?
I mean, your hatred for all things French notwithstanding, Rudy Gobert is certainly making, I think, a strong case to be in consideration for MVP. And I put this on Twitter the other night. Of course, you get ratioed left and right by people that are saying he's not even the best center in his division, which Nikola Jokic is certainly there. But I'm tired of everybody looking at raw numbers. I mean, Rudy Gobert is so much better than his numbers. I mean, I tweeted that after the Chicago game where Rudy went for 20, almost a triple double with blocks in there, and was just this presence every minute he was on the floor. I mean, he is, with all due respect to Ben Simmons, the defensive player of the year. And I think it's a pretty wide gap. And offensively, you and I had this debate last time, but he springs everybody on that Jazz team with his screen setting. So as far as impactful players on both ends of the floor, Rudy Gobert is right up there with the most impactful on both ends. I'm not going to vote for him, I don't think, for MVP, because I think there are better players in that mix. But can he finish top 5? I think that's possible.
I don't think you can go to bat for him on a social platform and then say you're not voting for him. If the season ended today, where does Rudy Gobert end up on your ballot?
Somewhere between 5 and 7 right now.
Oh, my God.
Right now.
But why am I having you on to talk about this?
Because I didn't say he was the MVP. I said he should be in the mix for MVP. I get a lot of people.
How many guys are in the mix for MVP, Chris? Can we stop this? It feels like it grows exponentially. Now there's 15 guys that you can say.
That's because, Dan, the calculus keeps changing, right? Like Joel Embiid was the front runner for an extended period of time, and then he goes down with an injury. LeBron James looked like the front runner, but he could be out until mid-April, which changes the dynamic. If Rudy Gobert stays healthy and plays the rest of the season, you can certainly make an argument that he should be considered MVP. I actually think, and I'm going to try to write this next week, but I think there's an even stronger argument that you should give it to Giannis for a third year in a row. Look at what he's doing right now.
I'm fine with that.
He's out with a minor knee injury, but I mean, the numbers are largely the same from last year. And if that Bucks team finishes with the best record in the East, which is certainly possible, I don't want to hear about voter fatigue with Giannis. He might deserve a third MVP.
Well, no, this just has to do with, and it shouldn't, what they have not done in the postseason. If the Bucks won the title last year and Giannis was having this season, then I think the voters would look at him differently. You don't even hear Giannis's name with the top MVP candidates. We're going out of our way.
That's bad on the voters, though, Dan. Like, that's bad on the voters who, again, I think it's voter fatigue, who are just looking like, I don't want to vote for Giannis again. There's only a handful of guys that have won 3 MVPs in a row. Giannis doesn't deserve to be in that rarefied air. No, it's all in a vacuum. It's based on the regular season. And I think you're going to have a hard time saying that there are better players than Giannis having a regular season.
Trade deadline. Well, let me start with the Lakers here. With AD and LeBron still out, what's the risk that they're running here? And will they do anything at the trade deadline?
I don't believe they do anything at the trade deadline because, I mean, they don't have a lot of assets to deal anyway. They've shipped out many of their draft picks in previous trades. And the one guy teams want, Horton Tucker, is the player the Lakers are not going to deal right now. Right now, it's just kind of bite down and see if you can get one win out of every 4 and keep yourself in the mix until LeBron and AD come back. I watched that, at least the first 3 quarters of that Pelicans game last night. I turned it off and it was like 102 to 70 something at the end of the third quarter. I mean, it's going to get ugly in Los Angeles over these next few weeks. And they've just got to hope that they stay inside that top 8 in time for LeBron and AD to come back. And look, as long as those two are back in mid-April, that gives them, 3-4 weeks to climb back up in the standings. So I'm not yet concerned about them missing the playoffs, but it is going to be a really ugly next few weeks in LA because they don't do anything well. I think they're still the number 1 defensive team in the league statistically, but they're not a good defense. And offensively, they're just mixing and matching guys out there. So I think it's going to be a tough stretch for the Lakers.
And then it comes to marquee names, Aaron Gordon, Kyle Lowry. Feels like that's about it. Are both going to be moved?
Well, it's pretty clear at this point that Aaron Gordon is going to be moved. I think Boston and Denver are 2 of the leading contenders right now for Gordon. And it's just going to come down to it really comes down to what Orlando is going to accept. Right now, there's a gap in what teams are offering and what the Magic want to get back. But I think that gap's going to be closed before Thursday afternoon. So I think Gordon moves. Evan Fournier, his teammate, I think is going to move with him when that deal ultimately happens. Oladipo, I think the Knicks' interest in Oladipo is vastly overstated. I don't think that Tom Thibodeau's in love with Oladipo there, nor do I think he fits their timeline. But I do think Oladipo gets auctioned off at some point somewhere. Lowry is interesting. I think Miami continues to be the front runner there because they'll part with Duncan Robinson, and Robinson is probably the best player that the Raptors can get back in that mix. The most interesting player, though, Dan, is John Collins. John Collins is an excellent player, and the Hawks have made him available, but their asking price is high, and I'm not expecting that asking price to go down. So John Collins is the one that I'm not sure is going to move. I'm very sure that Gordon and Oladipo are likely to move. Lowry, I think, is likely to move, along with Norman Powell. But John Collins is the one player that you still are not sure if he's going to move.
I like what the Suns are doing, and they're doing it quietly. I don't know if they're just a regular season team. They picked up from the bubble where they went undefeated in this season. So handicap the Phoenix Suns' bigger picture here.
Look, they've got a chance to be a conference finalist, at least in that conference, because Chris Paul has made them a tougher playoff team. But beyond Paul, I really like what DeAndre Ayton has done this year. I mean, Ayton is forever going to be compared to Luka Doncic and will never put up the kind of numbers or probably win the kind of awards that Doncic has done. But what Ayton has done this year has accepted that defense is his primary responsibility. And this Suns team, I believe, is still ranked inside the top 10 defensively. And that's largely because DeAndre Ayton has made a commitment to that end. He's still putting up numbers when he can on the offensive end. And Chris Paul, if you watch the game last night, goes out of his way to make sure Ayton gets some easy buckets around the rim. But he is locked in on that end of the floor. And if they're able to be top 10 defensively, they're going to give any team in that conference a real problem.
Great to talk to you as always, Chris. Have fun, and thanks for joining us.
You got it, Dan.
That's Chris Mannix, Sports Illustrated NBA senior writer.